Welcome to Season 4 of the Questions With podcast, hosted by Quest Ventures, the top venture capital fund in Asia. I am your host, April Vano, and join me as we explore the dynamic startup ecosystem and business landscape in the Philippines. As we listen to thought leaders and industry experts, innovators and entrepreneurs, we'll uncover the stories, insights, and trends across different industries shaping the future of this vibrant Southeast Asian nation. Today, we have with us Ms. Diane Eustaquio, a visionary leader and frontrunner in the development of the Philippine startup and innovation ecosystem. Diane was formerly the executive director of Idea Space Foundation, an incubator and accelerator for early-stage startups in the country. She continues to bring her experience and expertise as she works closely with government agencies through various entrepreneurship programs. With a strong background in business development and a passion for fostering the startup ecosystem, Diane has been guiding numerous startups, founders, scientists, as well as educators. She also serves as a mentor and advisor to various programs and initiatives, a customer discovery trainer, and a private sector representative to the Innovative Startup Act Steering Committee. An advocate for technology and entrepreneurship, she is dedicated to creating opportunities for more Filipinos and driving economic growth through innovation. In this episode, we'll delve into her views and outlook on the Philippines, uncovering invaluable insights and inspirations along the way through her stories as an industry leader and champion for entrepreneurship. Hello, Diane. Welcome to Questions With Podcasts. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Hello, April. Thank you for inviting me here to your podcast, and thank you to the rest of the Quest Ventures team for putting this together. I'd like to greet all the listeners of your podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is you're listening, and wherever you are, thank you for your continuous interest in growing startups.
Of course, you're more than welcome, and thank you for saying that. And yes, we do welcome all our listeners to this podcast, and I hope this will really be an engaging as well as insightful conversation around the Philippines, especially with your experience. And having known you for almost a decade now, I think there's a lot of stories we can go through, even if we have, some limited time for us to be, sharing or at least exchanging stories. But to get ahead with the conversation, perhaps you can share with us a snapshot of your journey in your career and maybe, what inspires you to do the work that you do, especially in entrepreneurship development.
So I got into entrepreneurship development in 2011. So when I was still working for Metro Pacific, we had this cross-functional team and we were going to put together an incubator. And I took an interest in it. It was a special project for many of us. But when we finally formed it, our corporate secretary said, well, now that we form an entity, we better have people running it. So the side project that it was for many of us, and then a few of us were chosen to lead it, and that's what became Idea Space. So ever since then, I have been focused on entrepreneurship development. Before that, I knew my joy comes from enabling others, which is why I take pride by being a very good executive support staff or executive assistant. For many, many years, I also ran a program that focused on continuous improvement. And so in the past, so I knew that my joy really comes from being in the background and helping people become a better version of themselves. So when Idea Space came, and I had also so much wiggle room to innovate and develop the program. So I was just in a wonderful situation where there was support, there was a need for it. So here we go. And I survived for 9 years doing that every day.
Yeah, you've been championing, of course, together with your team then, championing the Philippines ecosystem to where it is today, right? And there's a lot of, I would say, progress and evolution that we've seen over the last decade or so. But perhaps you could share what you're busy with now, because obviously you did transition out of private sector, but as you mentioned, you still know, or you continue to find joy in the work that you do. So maybe just to let everyone else know what you've been doing as of late.
Okay, so when Idea Space ended, when everything ends, you always have an opportunity to step back and look at how you can improve things, or what could you have done better, or in other words, lessons learned. I had time to step back and say, so what now, Diane? What do you do next? There are things that I wanted to do when I was in Idea Space, which was get myself more involved with government, because there was always this request from government, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? And my wings were a little clipped, because naturally when you're running an organization, you have to attend to the mission of the organization. You can't do all those side projects and you get distracted. You've got to focus. So it was an opportunity for me to work with government. So I've been doing, I'm not actually with the government, but I'm like a private sector person involved with government activities. I've also wanted to focus on two things as far as entrepreneurs are concerned. Two things that I learned in Idea Space is that there's more work, a lot of work to do in terms of understanding market and risk. Understanding risk and mitigating it, assessing, bringing down risk so that we can attract investors. So most of my time is focused on all sorts of work revolving around those two areas of interest. I do customer discovery training. A lot of times it's for entrepreneurship educators, so teachers of entrepreneurship. I also spend time with a special program run by the OST. It's called Sprint, and we train researchers to be more to understand their markets a lot more. This is an effort to bring whatever they've been researching in the lab for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, really out of the laboratory and really push it for commercialization. So I enjoy that program so much. We do that once a year. I also sit as private sector representative, one of two private sector representatives to the Innovative Startup Act Steering Committee. So one of the things we learn as we go along is that the ecosystem is, well, lots of people know how to plant trees, and now and then forever with the you've been labeled or like categorized as nascent. So I guess it's time we have to, we know how to plant the trees, but how can we grow the forest? How can we grow a very healthy forest? So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing now, is really finding out, connecting the dots and strengthening our ecosystem in areas where there's there's still lots of gaps.
Gaps.
Oh, sorry, no Filipino.
No, it's okay. Maybe some of our listeners will learn also some Filipino. But it is the Philippines we're talking about here. And as you mentioned, I do like that note or that line you said, right? It's easier, right, for us to be planting trees, but much more difficult to grow a forest and nurture that, right? And I think that's also the unique perspective that you have, because you've seen also the ecosystem itself as a young tree, right? And having a lot more trees growing, but it's still, like you mentioned, not as mature yet, right? So, and what are these areas of development, the gaps that we need to fill in order, right, for our ecosystem to grow and thrive, so this forest becomes really healthy and and big. So maybe on that note, right, like, what are your thoughts on the current state of entrepreneurship or innovation in the Philippines? Like, what are those gaps, perhaps even opportunities that you've seen across both the private sector and also through those government programs that you mentioned? What insights have you seen?
I mentioned the two gaping gaps. The biggest gaps, I think, for entrepreneurs is really understanding their market and bringing down risk. So, well, for me, I choose to stay in that space, but there's a lot more that we have to do. Like we need to do angel investment education and then encouraging government units to have policies to harbor innovation, so LGUs and all that. So there are lots of things that you can do in the ecosystem, but each one has, I think, should focus on an area where they think they can cultivate something, and then you can experiment. You can also apply the philosophy of lean startup in that space. You choose to build, test, learn, and over time, build your data points and then see the patterns, and then okay, you can really build expertise in that area. So for me, it's there in understanding the market so that entrepreneurs can really understand the pain points of their customers and the segments that they want to address, and then how do they unlock the value from that segment. So understanding how to, it's not just understanding and having empathy. So okay, now you understand, you have empathy, then you have to build a product. So build a product. Does this product make the kind of money that you need to support the business? Or how many more products do you need to build? Or how many more features do you need to build to make this viable? So little by little, help them grow around that. So does that address the question?
Yes, of course. I mean, and I think you pointed out, right, like in terms of understanding, your customer, at least like you mentioned, the feedback, or at least what we've seen some startups miss out is really a strong understanding of their market. And perhaps, touching on your experience with the programs you mentioned, working with scientists and inventors, you mentioned that, and trying to help them towards commercializing, right, these inventions. Like, what are you seeing on the ground?
Well, we really need to pair people who have the domain expertise and who really have built, have accumulated their so-called 10,000 hours. So these are most likely the scientists, so the researchers have been at it for so long. We need to pair them with the entrepreneurs. So I think we have to accept that not all researchers, not all engineers can become entrepreneurs. And so I think there is an important, that's why there's a need for an ecosystem, or there's a need to really, for universities to network and understand who are the industry mentors who can open doors for these teams of innovation in their universities, and then get the scientists to also understand how it is at the grassroots, or how it is on the ground. So take, for example, recently we worked with a group from one of the major universities, and they wanted to build a drone that will test the water. So they thought that, there's a business that I can build around this, a drone that tests the water. But then, so we said, can you narrow down your market? So they narrowed down and they said, we think that shrimp farmers would need this innovation. So they went out and talked to shrimp farmers and found out that the shrimp farmers' problem is not really testing the water. Yes, that's a part of the task that they have to do, but they don't have to do it every day. But the main concern that keeps them awake at night is the variability in their catch. So it turns out that the shrimp are territorial, and when you feed the shrimp from one corner of the pond, the shrimp from the other end of the pond don't get to eat as much as the ones who are near the food. So the scientist said, oh, that's so simple. I can build a drone. I can build a drone that will distribute the food more equally. So things like that, a shrimp farmer has a problem, and then scientist knows the technology, and it can be you can build it for the shrimp farmer. So those are things that we need to do, like get people more out of the building talk to customers. It sounds so simple, but a lot of times kasi we have our biases and go out and talk to people, and then you see it and hear it over and over again, and then your biases start. You start thinking that, oh, you have to get rid of these biases because this is what your customers are
thinking, or their own feedback is more valuable.
Correct. So that's
really interesting. Like, of course, as you mentioned, it might seem simple, but you have to be at it, right? As let's say a startup or a team, right? As you mentioned, there has to be that, I would say, mix of people, right? With different experience or expertise. And outside of that, it's really your customers, right? So you all have to find out if the product or the idea that you're building is something that these users or customers would find useful.
And one thing I learned in idea space is because we ran an accelerator program, is the beauty of having a forcing function. Every week you're checked on, and that's a forcing function. Sometimes you just do, if you don't have anyone guiding you, even if you're an expert team, sometimes you get lost and you're focusing on something too much. So, even experienced entrepreneurs, sometimes they want to touch base with me and my former colleagues just to help them brainstorm or help them look at a situation in a different way, just like how it was during their days of when they were in the accelerator. But I think also, the more entrepreneurs who I have worked with, the less times that they come and seek guidance, I'm happy. Because it means they can form their own questions and they can find the answers themselves. So there's more and more of that now, and I'm really quite happy that the base is growing. Ecosystem isn't yet where we want it to be. I think there's a lot of maybe intervention, or I don't know, maybe we just let it. At this point, maybe we just let it grow naturally. I read an article today saying there's more carbon capture in a forest that's naturally grown, and then it's so diverse versus a monocrop forest. So maybe likening the ecosystem also to that. Maybe we just plant some seeds somewhere, like DOST has been created a fund after funding all these technology business incubators across different universities. They found out that they don't come out of their shells in the universities. So DOST formed a fund and said, okay, this is a regional fund. If you can, they call it the reseed program, where you can bring the players of the triple helix together. Then here's some seed money and bring them together. So like they have programs in, say, Iloilo, where you have academe, government, and the private sector working together and focusing on what are the gaps in the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem there. In Cagayan de Oro, their program said, we're going to focus on angel investment education. So they're doing educating their traditional businessmen and making them understand what startups are, what's the nature of startups, what's the nature of investing in startups. In Iloilo, they decided, okay, our focus is we need to have policies in place. So they're focusing on helping the local governments craft the resolutions that they need to support the startup ecosystem. So different areas, I have different areas of focus. So there, I think government, I'm very happy actually, is though people will say government has to do more. Yes, but I think from where we were before, a lot has happened. Like DICT also is focusing on really the early stage on ICT-based startups. So a lot of they used to have a program called the Philippine Startup Challenge, and that continues. They also have a similar fund to the DOST, but it's more of, it has to be initiated by, it can be initiated by non-university organizations. And so it's like funding an incubator also. So they funded NAGA, and then I think they are going, maybe I shouldn't say what region yet because I think it's not signed, but then there are a lot of other regions who are putting forward their proposal to the DICT for that fund to fund incubators, whether it's a local government initiative, whether it's a private sector organization's initiative. So DTI also has a program. DTI hopefully is your like last tool in the funding journey. Hopefully DTI has this program where they are partnering with private sector funds and provide a larger investment in the startups. So I think government has done pretty well. We finally had legislation, finally, and that's a good thing. It's been able to. It's the mother of all the policies where local governments are able to start their startup support. Like I'd like to say props to Quezon City. Quezon City has started a startup program. And it's funded,
it's doing very well.
Yeah. So, and there are more LGUs who are interested. Davao City has thought it's been in the policy for so long, but finally they're really going to be putting money into it. So, I think from what I hear, they're putting some significant money every year for X number of years. Isabela, all the way up north, provides 1 million pesos every year for their startup program. So isn't that amazing? So something away from Metro Manila.
Indeed. It's fantastic to hear all these different places in the Philippines being champions as well. Because sorry to cut you off there, but it's really also important to see the Philippines beyond Metro Manila and the opportunities for entrepreneurs, outside, right, or across the country is really important. And as you mentioned, I think the role of the government is really significant in fostering that and at least taking the lead and doing their own programs, and hopefully the rest of the business community and the more local, smaller communities can also grow.
Yeah, I think though it's still, I still believe that a healthier ecosystem is one driven by the entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs have longer term thinking versus government, or entrepreneurs. In my almost 10 years of working in idea space, and also plus how many now, +3. So if you ask the entrepreneurs what drives them and why they're doing this, a lot of them are motivated by family. It's for my family, and I want to pass this on to my children. So there's a lot of long-term thinking. There's not very many yet, like in the West, who say, "Oh, I want to exit and sell this." Or if there are those who are exiting. They are because it's a fund that they want for their family. I want to buy a house, like some entrepreneur that I know. He, as soon as he exited, he bought a house for his mother because it was his dream. So a lot of them are motivated by family, and therefore it's more intergenerational versus getting government. Very few maybe in government would think more intergenerational. I'd like to think there are, but then they think there are more entrepreneurs who think intergenerational. So and then for university, just by the nature of the cycles in university, they're much shorter. So commitment to be a player in the ecosystem is a little less than government or the businessmen. So I really hope there are a lot more businessmen who would get involved. Of course, it's in between attending to your business and doing things to grind the local startup ecosystem wherever they are. it'll take a lot of resources from them, particularly time. So I really God bless those entrepreneurs who are working on helping stimulate things wherever they are.
Yeah, and for entrepreneurs who keep on going, right? That's also one of the things in the Philippines
Yes.
that I've also seen, and I'm sure you'd agree. It's also the cycle, right, of the entrepreneurs that come and go in the ecosystem. And
Yeah.
perhaps maybe we can direct also, the conversation towards that. Let's look at these
Yeah.
entrepreneurs in this ecosystem. Like, what are your thoughts on, the gaps or the challenges faced by entrepreneurs, or at least in general? Like, what are your insights on the Filipino entrepreneur?
Yeah, the coming and the going. No? So in 2017, Idea Space with Launch Garage and Kickstart, we co-funded a research and to see what happens to all those startups who failed. Sadly, 80% of those who failed don't want to go up and do a startup again. So what are we doing as an ecosystem to encourage them to go back? Because, that's really just the first tuition fee. You go to school, right? You pay tuition. And so this is the tuition fee of becoming an entrepreneur. And so to have support systems to encourage them to move forward. At that time, I also introduced psychotherapists into the Idea Space program. I was kind of questioned why you're doing this. Well, for me, I was spending more time listening to their woes. And then I said, I can't be the guidance counselor of these guys. I am not equipped. So we needed to bring an experienced psychotherapist into the program to help them let go of that mental baggage. Now, if you're journeying, even Jesus said, just take your stick and your walking stick and your sandals, just journey and travel light. So the same thing with moving on after your startup has failed. How do you travel light? You have no more money. Okay, materially you're traveling light. But I think the heavier baggage is your mental baggage. And with experienced mentors or experienced coaches who can help you let go of your mental baggage, move forward, and start something new again based on all the... Besides, you already paid your tuition on a failed startup. Why not try again? And I think when they do the third time, I actually even found an entrepreneur who had 10 failed endeavors before he really succeeded. So that staying power or that inspiration to keep going. There are many things that we have to do. One is like the professional help. Second is the support system amongst entrepreneurs. Recently I lauded this group in Startup PH, and I said, good going, guys, because they talked about failure. They talked about how broken they are and this is just among entrepreneurs. So I think we need more activities like this, apart from awareness and hackathons and all these early stuff. But now as they are traveling through the journey, what do we need to give them? So the more established startups also, their challenge, a lot of them have told me that the talent war, their local startups and the talent war with foreign startups who come into town, and let's say he has a dev he's already paying 150,000 pesos a month, and then the foreign startup comes in and pays them higher. Of course, they're going to move. So what do we do to help these entrepreneurs? One of them said, we also need support in terms of upskilling our team, how to get them more abreast with the change in technology. So things like that. We also need to provide help. So there are lots of things we need. We still have it. It's the nice thing about it. It's the ever-changing situation. It's so when things are organically growing, the problems are just keep on. We uncover new things, and if we work together, I think we can find. There's never an end to finding the resources to address a problem. That's the beauty. That's the beauty of life.
Absolutely. I think there's even more enablers as well now, and that's good, because all these other challenges, as you pointed, would need other, I would say, agencies, not necessarily government, right? But other organizations or institutions to come in and intervene and have their respective programs or activities that will support the ecosystem as a whole, and of course focusing on entrepreneurs. And I actually wanted to kind of thank you also from the earlier sharing you just said about the journey of how do you call this, startups and getting grants or funding and support from the government agencies, like coming through the DICT and DOSD and DTI. That's like I guess that kind of shows the journey of the startup, or at least the stages. And beyond that, as you mentioned, the entrepreneurs themselves, like in those different stages, have different needs, and you would have to have certain specific programs targeted to that, and perhaps it's also something that as ecosystem builders or enablers, that's an opportunity, right? And as you mentioned, it's just growing organically, which is a good thing. And that means, we are growing as a whole, and we can try to find more of these, like, I guess, stars, right? The startups that can be the next stars, and really usher them, right, towards success. And maybe on that note, right, like in terms of opportunities and trends, currently in the Philippines business landscape, like where do you think, we should be focusing or maybe right now, what are the industries that are growing and an opportunity for growth as well?
I still think that we should focus on the Golden Triangle first. I think focusing on e-commerce, logistics, and fintech. Somebody in government told me, logistics, gas-gas na yan eh. Logistics na naman, Diane. But there's still so many gaps. Take, for example, a young entrepreneur in Tagum. He's building a ride-hailing app for tricycles, and motorcycles. So he knows how to monetize, and the other area is like motorcycles, so more like an Angkas or Grab. So he understands, because there's already a model like Grab, Angkas. So where do you monetize? How much do how much do you more or less charge per kilometer, etc. But how to build the other segment, which is the tricycle. So it's a different segment, it's a two-sided market. So those two sides, he still doesn't know how to unlock value. And so there are still lots of areas in the triple helix. There are opportunities, like even at the very hyper local level, understanding that part of logistics, understanding how to build a tech for that, understanding also how the business will revolve around it. So there's still a lot to focus on the triple helix. And then there's also the larger logistics issues, and then the data you need for the logistics companies to rely on, the fintech part also. So I think, I don't know if you, being in the VC space, the VCs I've spoken to are saying that just look at the other economies. They really focused on the Golden Triangle first. Everything else will follow afterwards. No, when companies know, like there's this company, there's startup in Cagayan de Oro. He first started with a brick and mortar laundry business, and then he realized that other laundry shops are not making as much money as this very busy laundry shop where they have more customers than laundry machines. So why can't I just move that laundry over to the laundry shop that doesn't have enough customers? So that's a logistics issue. And then how do how does that business work? So there are a lot of opportunities where we can help, where or that need to be solved in terms of the triple helix space, and then how And so if you're a TBI, let's say for example Cagayan de Oro, and that entrepreneur is in Cagayan de Oro, how do you help him put the pieces together? Who are in the network who can help him? So understanding how that will work in Cagayan de Oro, and then maybe after he's done with Cagayan de Oro, can he replicate and do it in another city nearby? Can he go to Valencia, Bukidnon, or could he also go all the way to Ozamis City or something like that? So a lot on the hyper-local level, and again the triple helix thing. Sorry, the what do you call this? The golden triangle. The triple helix also.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, like in terms of fundamentals, right? It does seem to, I would say, simple, or I'd say, oh, there's already a solution or a startup out there doing this. But if you do look into how would you say, let's say, Grab, for example, has reached in the Philippines, it's not yet across the country.
Yeah.
And it cannot. It's unable to reach all the islands, right? So
Correct.
you do need local players or local
Correct.
innovators to address the needs. And I mean, I think that's also the trend, right? Not just even tech startups. I know larger companies from, manufacturing to retail, their expansion plans are not anymore focused on like the main cities. They are growing their footprint across different provinces or islands. So I think with that direction, it should be the same as well with technology, right? Because obviously, we're moving forward with technology. It's no longer, an option. So there's a lot of opportunity for technological solutions and business ideas to tackle challenges across different parts of the country. But basics like you mentioned from the golden triangle.
I envision it like molecules, floating around, and they're going through this funnel of innovation, and they sometimes are inside the funnel, and then they'll go out, and then maybe they'll go into some small city to do something, and then it can go in, and then they get, because you're floating around also, and then other people doing the same thing maybe becomes a bigger molecule, and they're able to attract these smaller molecules, and they merge and they collaborate and become bigger. So we're seeing that. We're seeing startups acquire smaller startups, and then let's say they get acqui-hired, and then it's all these molecules floating around. Sorry, that's my imagination of how I look at the startups. Okay, you're sometimes seeing just floating around, but just keep them in the ecosystem and they'll get absorbed. So even let's say a startup fails, that's one thing floating around in the ecosystem, but then his or her expertise will be needed by someone else, and then they maybe join another startup. They may not have to build another startup on their own, but because of they've invested in themselves, we've also invested in that capacity development, they'll be able to contribute. Sorry to share my mind and how it looks to me when I close my eyes.
I mean, it's great to see some of these visuals. I know this is a podcast and people will just be listening, but we started off with an image of like trees growing into a forest, and then now we have the movement of molecules. So I really see also you're very much close to nature, and I know that your background as well in your family. So that's a good way, right, to paint a picture. And I think that's what we're trying to do here as well in these episodes that we have, and focusing on, how does the Philippine ecosystem look like? And really, I mean, it's been really interesting and insightful to hear the stories, the examples, and the insights that you've given us. And I wish there was more time, and perhaps there are even other topics to discuss. We didn't even touch on the education space, which I know you're very passionate about, and obviously supporting more enablers, right, to do the work that you're similarly, like how you've charted your own journey across your career. So it's great to have Diane, part of the Philippine startup ecosystem, and you inspire a lot of others as well, from the entrepreneurs to the other enablers. So yeah, maybe to wrap up perhaps, right, and try to make it a little bit of a lighter note. And we were talking about like forests and how do you call this, and planting trees or nurturing trees, right? So like perhaps maybe an anecdote or an example of how you also like nourish yourself, right? Because you as an enabler, you're an important person or individual, and you make an impact in the work that you do. But looking inward, like how do you keep yourself nourished?
Well, I have a lot more quiet time now. I think more time with reading the Bible, understanding from Genesis, understanding that this is on an ecosystem. So we have an own ecosystem in our body. So this Israeli research says 56% of our cells are non-human cells. I said, oh my God, when I read that, really? So, but then, the rest, of course, there's more human cells in terms of mass, but the different cells we have, and a lot of it is in our guts or in our body, usually in our digestive system. So there's fungus there, there's bacteria there, there's all kinds of cells there that are non-human. So even within our own bodies, keeping the balance, understanding that you have to keep the balance of the bacteria and fungus so that you don't have a fungal infection or bacterial infection. So I think it's important to nourish yourself. Start first with yourself, because you're your number one your very first resource is your body. So our body.
Exactly.
So taking time for ourselves, things like pulling all-nighters all week long, that's not healthy. So learning that. I used to think that no, I should work. But yes, nourishing myself physically, and also nourishing ourselves spiritually, learning how to always travel light. If something just didn't happen, don't add it to your mental baggage. Just move forward. It's not easy to just move forward. At least process it so you can move forward. Find people to help you process if you can't process it yourself. So I spend time also with my psychotherapist every now and then who help me. I go on retreats to my spiritual masters. Every week I have a Bible study group, then we get together to help reflect on things. So I guess that's what helps me keep going. When you're young, it's time. It kind of everything is in an explosion. I think purposely God made it that way so that you can experiment on different things. So when I was young, I was experimenting on different things. Somebody even called me, "Oh, such a job hopper, Diane." But until I really found something, this is where I'm happy. And then I found out it's not the job that makes me happy. It's really finding myself in enabling others. That's what makes me happy. So it could be being an executive assistant and then running an innovation program or something like that, or helping entrepreneurs. It's the journey of seeing people become a better version of themselves. That's what keeps me going. So
That's
every day.
wonderful.
So I asked myself, okay, am I still happy doing that? And I am. I'm still very happy doing it.
Thank you so much, Diane. And, it's been a pleasure, of course, in this podcast, but, personally, I've known you ever since I also started my own journey in the startup ecosystem. And those are really, really good insights and, practical things that you do for yourself. And I think a nice reminder, especially for all those listening as well, to really take care of yourself, because obviously, whether you're an entrepreneur or business leader, professional, it's important, right, for you to be able to do the great work and contribute to either the industry or the society you're in. It's important that you're well as well. So that's really wonderful. Thank you so much, Diane. It's been really inspiring talking and chatting with you today.
You inspire me too.
Oh,
Thank you, April.
thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for doing the things that you do. Thank you for deciding that there are other areas where you can contribute to. Decided to stay in Cebu, but then you also you're working with a local ecosystem, but also there's a bigger world out there also that you're working with.
Definitely.
So,
It's really that dynamic of both perspectives and seeing, like you mentioned, a convergence, right? And a synergy across different ecosystems and different players. So, I mean, just to wrap up, really, thank you so much, Diane, for joining us. Thank you to all our listeners tuning in to this episode of Questions With. We have today Diane Eustaquio, a startup enabler from the Philippines. So for more episodes like this, be sure to hit the follow button on whichever platform you're listening from. And I am your host, April Vano. Till next time. Thank you for joining us.